first middle note that we're going to talk about is black pepper. So it's spicy and warm, and as you can imagine, it does smell like pepper. So it's effective on muscle aches because of the warming effects of this essential oil. As you can imagine, it's also a good circulation booster. And if anyone's been suffering from a respiratory disorder and they want to clear it up, maybe it's something that can aid it, even if it's just been something as simple as a cold, then this can be really effective for it. It's also good for some digestive ailments too. But you must watch because it can cause skin irritations, and you would never use this oil neat, so that's another reason why it pays to be clinically trained. Using something like this neat on the skin could cause a lot of discomfort. So just to check the colour and the consistency, you can see that we're getting into the thicker oils now, and this one is a clear oil. But again, you start to see when you've got the different thicknesses of oil here, and you can see this is a much thicker oil. Our next middle note is cardamom. Now, this might not be one that's so commonly included in a lot of your blends that you can buy, or you can actually have made up by your clinical aromatherapist, but it is quite a nice oil. It's spicy, it's quite woody, but it's also potent, so it's good for stress relief. It can be good for digestive ailments, and it can also be an appetite stimulant. It's also antiseptic, very warming, and it's another oil that's good for muscle aches and pains. With cardamom though, cautions are to avoid in pregnancy, and it can also cause skin irritation, so just use it cautiously. Just to check again our colour and consistency, this is quite a thin oil and it's running clear. Our next oil is carrot seed oil. It's quite a sweet smelling oil, and it's also quite earthy. What this is antiseptic, beneficial to the digestive system like so many oils. It's quite detoxifying, it's also stimulating, and it can actually stimulate menstruation. So for some people this might be a necessary and helpful oil, whereas for others we may want to avoid it completely. The caution with this is to avoid during pregnancy, but again, you would have your full consultation with your client and decide if it is a beneficial oil or not. Just to check how it's running here. We'll see what colour. Again, this one looks more yellow toned, and it's getting onto the thicker side of oils, and it's not running too freely. The next oil is chamomile. There are lots of variations, but it tends to be fresh, quite sweet, and quite a fruity scent. This is a very soothing oil on the skin. It's also quite a good sleep aid. You'll probably recognise this from a lot of different products that you can buy just for relaxation purposes, even chamomile tea. It's also really effective on headaches and good for stress conditions, but the caution can be to avoid it in early pregnancy, and it can irritate the skin. So just because it's a popular oil doesn't mean that everyone can use it. As you can see, this one's got a yellow tone and it's running quite freely. Cinnamon leaves our next oil. It's quite a spicy, warm fragrance, and this one has quite a lot of benefits to it. Really good again for muscle aches and pains. It can be really good for digestive ailments because it's so stimulating too. It's antiseptic, and this is one though that can affect menstrual conditions, so it can be beneficial, but it could be quite negative too, depending on what the menstrual condition is. So that's why it's so important to do your full consultation and do your research on whether the oil would be beneficial or detrimental to your client. The cautions with this one as it can cause irritation, and avoid it in pregnancy because it can have effects on different conditions. It is an emmenagogue, so just be very careful. Just to check the colour and the consistency of our oil. Now this is quite a yellow, quite a deep toned oil, and it's starting to get a little bit on the thicker side. Next oil, Cypress. This is a very fresh, with a sort of woody element oil, but it's a really, really nice oil to use. This is another one that's good for respiratory conditions, so a great one again if you've maybe had a cold or you've been getting over a flu. It's quite good to balance hormones, so a lot of people choose to use it in a menopausal related blend or a menstrual related blend. It's another one that's effective on muscular aches. Getting back to any conditions that affect women, it can be good for fluid retention. Another oil that's great for oily skin, and it's also another one that's effective for stress relief. The cautions for Cypress oil are it's generally fine, but like everything, proceed with care. Just do your full consultation just to make sure that your client does have any conditions, that they could even have an allergy to these oils, so always be aware. And to again check the colour, very clear and runs very easily. Okay, now we're on to geranium oil, which is a really nice, really popular oil. It's quite musky, warm and sweet. It's a great hormone balancer, a really effective stress reliever. It's also good for fluid retention, and if anyone needs a bit of a circulation boost, this can be a really nice oil to put in the mix. The cautions for geranium are to watch because it can be a skin irritant, and excessive use can cause some irritation to the skin, so just be very aware. Avoid using in early pregnancy or at all if you're unsure. And just again to check the colour and whether it's a thicker or a thinner oil. This is quite a yellow toned oil, and we're starting to get into the thicker side of our oils here. Now we're moving on to Juniper oil, which is quite sweet and woody. This one's really effective on menstrual problems, also fluid retention, so within that same zone. It's another oil that's great for stress related conditions, and it's another one that's good for skin conditions, specifically oily skin. That's quite an effective one. And yet again, it's another oil that you could use for muscle aches relieving blends. There's so many different oils that all do similar things, but you've got the variation of what you can add to the blends, so Juniper's another one for these. The cautions for this one: avoid it in pregnancy. Also avoid it in severe kidney conditions, just because it can be so stimulating. So again, can't stress it enough, do your research. Don't use an oil on a client with an ailment unless you're very sure that it's going to be effective and not detrimental. And as you can see, this is a clear oil and it runs quite freely. Our next oil is Marjoram. It's quite a sweet and spicy oil, and it's yet another oil that's great for relaxing your muscles. It's also good for digestive ailments again. It's another oil that can be good for menstrual conditions. This time it can be good for menstrual discomfort. It's also great for insomnia, so if someone's having trouble sleeping, then Marjoram could be put into the mix for them. And it's another oil that, if your client has any nervous or stress conditions, really effective in your mix. The caution with Marjoram is mainly to avoid during pregnancy. And to check our colour and consistency. This is quite a clear oil, and again it's running very freely, so it's quite a thin oil. Our next oil is Nutmeg, and this is quite a spicy and musky scent. It's a really good circulation booster. It's good for stimulating digestion. It's also anti-inflammatory and very effective on clarity of thought. So it could be good in a mix for a client that might not be feeling as good as they normally do and can't think as clearly, but it could also be effective for a client that might be about to do an exam. The cautions with this are to avoid during pregnancy and keep the concentration low due to the stimulating properties. And to again check the colour and the thickness. It's quite a light yellow oil, and it's quite a thin oil. It's running quite freely. So our final oil is rosemary oil, which, just like the herb that you may use in cooking, it's fresh, herbal smelling, almost minty. It's quite sort of stimulating in that way. Really good for easing muscular aches. Also effective for boosting circulation, and it's another one that can stimulate the mind. It's also really effective in a mix to clear colds. The cautions for rosemary are to avoid it if you have high blood pressure, also avoid in pregnancy, and if you have an epileptic client, then just watch because it does have such a stimulating property. Again, just do your full consultation, do your research, and don't use an oil if in any doubt. So to check our colour and our thickness, this is a very, very clear and quick running oil, so just be aware when you're mixing your blends how quickly this oil can run.